Here is a quick little mic check. Check, check, check. 1, 2, 3. Check, check, check. What is up, YouTube? My name is Midnight Wolf, and welcome to College Football Among the Ranks show. The name is a work in progress, but I kind of wanted to do something way different than what we normally do on this channel. We're in a completely different ball field, if you will. So I really wanted to go over college football. I've got a lot on my chest that I just wanted to kind of, I guess, vent in regards to it. So I decided, hey, why not create a little stream type podcast sort of thing? So I don't know. Let's see. How should I start? So basically, I've been thinking a lot about like preseason polls and how much I hate them. I think that they're very dumb, and I'll go into more detail as to what I mean by that. But I just wanted to kind of get these sort of things off my chest. But the reason why I'm doing this though is college football is around the corner, and so it's kind of like really fresh on my mind of what all I want to kind of go over this season, and so I wanted to kind of just off the top of my cuff, if that's even how the saying goes. We're just gonna go ahead and get started. I'm a little nervous because I'm kind of out of practice, so please bear with me with this. But I do have some other pictures and stuff throughout the stream that I'm going to be kind of bringing up onto the screen as I talk and as we talk about all these different things here and there. But let's kind of get into, I guess, the AFCA coaches poll. So that it will be on the next slide. And so the reason why it's been kind of like placed upon my heart to like go over this is I have this, like, I guess, hatred for preseason polls, and there are very blatant reasons as to why that is the case. And I don't have an issue with some of what they have on here. Like Georgia, they're the defending national champs. They should be at number 1, and Michigan, I'll let it slide. They were a good team last year, so might as well keep them in the top 4. But we start getting into some problems after 2. And let me kind of bring up kind of the next photo. So as you can see on the screen, I have some different teams highlighted throughout this that I can't help but like scratch my head in regards to where in the world they like got this information, or in terms of how they want to rank these teams. I mean, we haven't even seen these teams play on the field yet, and they're ranking these teams as though they deserve these spots, and I just don't understand that. I think it's kind of dumb in a way. I mean, I don't want to silence the media because this is a media poll, but at the same time, I think that preseason polls hurt the college football as a whole, because teams that are more deserving of spots later on in the season kind of get shafted a little bit, and having these preseason polls kind of bolsters these other teams that are constantly in the top 10 spaces, because in the preseason they're given these high ranks, and then of course their opponents are given high ranks. So if they win against them or if they lose against them, they have already an upper hand in that. They have that quality win or that quality loss that they like to talk about in the playoff committees and all that stuff. So I'm going to kind of go out of order a little bit because of the flow of things. So I will start with Alabama, but I will probably skip down to Texas, and then I'll hop back up to USC, and then talk about Notre Dame, and then TCU and Kansas State, and then Oklahoma to kind of finish out this list. And then after this, I will kind of switch over and kind of go over another poll, that a preseason poll that somebody that I do respect kind of released, and kind of go over my comments on that as well. But before we do that, let's just kind of dive right on into Alabama. So let's take a look at Alabama's, let's see here. Looks like I'm having some technical difficulties with some of these. Hopefully it pops up. All right, so let's take a look at Alabama's schedule here. From last season, and kind of why I think that they are way overrated as a team, and why I can't stand it that Alabama gets so much, like, they have so much going for them in the media. It's not even funny, because they are always starting their seasons off in the top 1, top 2, top 3, top 4. They're always like starting off the season in a position that is in the playoff position, basically. Now, I know these preseason playoffs aren't official, or these preseason polls are not official. I get that, but you can't tell me that they don't at least somewhat influence the later polls, the ones that do matter. This is all about that first impression amongst the committees, and you start off a team at ranked 3 in the nation, who I don't think is deserving of that spot in my opinion, because, like, if you look at their previous season, which I know that the committee doesn't like to bring up past seasons in terms of how they rank these teams, but that's literally the only information that we have on any of these teams is the previous season. And so to utilize that as your criteria, I'm sorry, but I can't help but just look through certain games and be like, you think that's the number 3 team in the nation before we even actually see them actually play? You want to rank them at number 3 after a seat, like, the information that we can fall back on. Like, look at how they played against Texas, a team. Or let me go back. I'll come back to Texas. I totally forgot about my flow of things. Let's go to Tennessee. Look, I mean, Tennessee, they beat Alabama, and it was a pretty good game. I don't remember the game fully, but I do remember it being a very good game. But it's a team that they lost to. They almost lost to Texas A&M. I should have highlighted that one. That's a very close game that was really close. And from what I understand, I don't think Texas A&M finished ranked that season yet. They're a number 3 ranked team this year, according to the coaches poll. You have LSU, who, like, in the last couple of years hasn't really been their usual selves. And they did finish in the 10th place, it looks like, according to the poll here, or from last season. And that's great, but still they lost to a team that they were most likely a favorite in, and it just kind of goes to show, like, how much bias they have towards Alabama. As if you haven't noticed already, I'm pretty biased against Alabama. Just because of how much love they're given, unnecessary love. Like, they just constantly are giving them the benefit of the doubt every season, undeservingly. And don't get me wrong, Nick Saban's a great coach. He does a great job. He does get his players ready for every single game. But they're not perfect. They're not a perfect team every single season. They make mistakes, but yet we're gonna give them the top third position at the start of the season. Anyways, I'm kind of rambling on about Alabama here, and I'm trying not to make this like a huge Alabama roast, but like it's kind of messed up to see that, you know, this team be given such a high status. And then I did kind of mention Texas a little bit, and I'm kind of going to use that to kind of segue into Texas. But I mean, look at the loss against Texas. They almost lost to Texas that year, a year that Texas wasn't really at their best, really. They weren't really anything great that particular season, and they almost lost. And I remember that game because I remember Texas almost beat Alabama with their backup quarterback. I mean, if their backup quarterback could have made one more really good play, they could have easily won that game. And you want to give this team their number third position. That's crazy. I just can't get over that. But we're also going to kind of look at Texas here, and that's kind of the segue into Texas, because you look at how I can sit there and kind of roast Alabama a little bit. I'm sorry I made it that whole first segment about how much I hate Alabama, but I just, after seeing how Texas ended their season, I mean, look at all those L's, and then you want to sit there and give Alabama the third spot in the nation. It just blows my mind. And then you want to give Texas this 12th spot, when there are plenty of other teams, and I'll kind of get to that here in just a little bit with TCU, plenty of other teams that deserve a much higher spot than Texas does in the number 12th spot. That doesn't make any sense that you would put them above TCU or even Kansas State. I mean, yeah, they did beat them last year, but not by much. Literally, it was a one possession game pretty much. And then you like, they lost to Alabama. I don't think that they were at their full strength in Texas Tech, so I will cut them some slack there, and it was a close game. But then they lost to OSU, who then lost to Oklahoma. And, you know, Oklahoma was their greatest game of last year. That's what, is crazy, is like, they definitely put on a show against Oklahoma, but then they lost to OSU, a team that lost to Oklahoma that year. So it just is such a bizarre year for Texas. They definitely don't fully have it all figured out just yet. And they lost to Washington as well, which, I mean, Washington's a good team, but still, you look at all of those losses and you want to put them at rank number 12, when the last we saw of Texas is a 5-loss team. That makes no sense. That makes no sense at all. There are other Big 12 teams out there that are more deserving of that number 12 spot, and I would argue even higher up than number 12. But really? And that's the first of the Big 12s that we see, and Texas leads the way because of their brand, apparently. Same with Alabama. And don't get me wrong, we're gonna get to a team that is my favorite team of all of them, and I even I think that they're given such a high rank for the way they played last year. So we will get to that team towards the end of this little spiel of it. So let's kind of go into USC. Now from the get-go, like last year, I did not understand the hype on USC. Like I just don't like. It was almost like Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams, the moment they stepped foot in USC territory, it was like everybody was like, oh, USC this, USC that. It was a weird thing. I don't fully understand the hype surrounding them. I mean, they couldn't really get much done at Oklahoma. And I mean, they did well at USC, but they pretty much, performed about like they did at Oklahoma. A two loss season and in your or a one loss game or a one loss season in your regular season games, and then you go and you lose your conference championship game, and then you go to a bowl game and then you end up losing that. I mean, that's pretty much what they did while they were at Oklahoma. So I don't know why there was this sudden hype with USC to give them like so much praise for being there. I mean, I have some of these games highlighted, and it's like any one of these games that were W's could have been losses. They were literally like one score games that could have easily gone either way. And like the ones that I laugh at the most are Oregon State, Arizona, California. Like, really? We're going to rank USC as the number 6 team in the nation when they could have easily had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total losses in that entire season. They scraped by. They had, of course, the loss against Utah and a second loss against Utah. But the second loss against Utah was a complete massacre. 47-24, that's a pretty good margin there. And then you go up against Tulane. I mean, I hate to laugh about Tulane because, like, Tulane's just not one of those programs that you normally hear of doing well. And yet, they lost to Tulane in their bowl game. It cracks me up. And say what you will about bowl games that are not the playoffs, they're still very important. And I don't care who you are. If you go to a bowl game, you better play your butt off. I mean, there's no sugarcoating that at all. You better go and play your game. I mean, that's what you're there to do. That's why you're playing the sport, is to play and have fun ultimately, but you also want to win. And you go to your bowl game and then you lose to Tulane. It's kind of funny. Like, and we're going to sit there and put them at number 6 in the nation before we've even seen how they do this year. Before a single down is even played, and we're gonna rank USC at number 6. If you haven't noticed how much I hate preseason polls, like you can really get a feel for where I'm coming from. Like, and we're just getting started. I mean, let's look at Notre Dame. Like, I'm sorry, but Notre Dame at 13 makes no sense to me. It makes no sense to me. For one, I do have a bias towards teams who are independent, or against teams that are independent, rather. Like, I think in order to be eligible for the playoffs, you need to be affiliated with a conference. I feel like there should be a lot more value placed upon conference championships. And maybe that's just me, but I mean, it makes no sense to me that Notre Dame is another one of those brands that gets the benefit of the doubt more than they'd really deserve. I mean, you look at all of those games in their season last year. Like there are so like I practically have almost every single game highlighted from last year that could have gone either way. They lost to Ohio State. Which is not, that's that's usual. Or Ohio State is, if you're gonna lose to any team on your roster any team on your schedule, Ohio State's one of those teams to lose to. I will give you that. But then you have Marshall, you have Stanford, and you lose to USC. And then all those other W's that I have highlighted, you could have very well easily lost those games as well. This could have easily been a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 loss team. Now, probably more like 8, because if they lost 8 games, I don't know if they would be bowl eligible. So it'd probably be more like 8 games. But still. And then on top of that, they wouldn't have played a conference championship game because they have no conference. So it makes no sense to me why Notre Dame gets the benefit of the doubt and they could get to be in rank 13 or higher at the start of almost every season. When the last we saw of them, they struggled. They struggled big time. Now, a W is a W. I don't want to belittle that. A win is a win. They got a good, or most of their season figured out, and they even won their bowl game. That is a major accomplishment, and I don't want to belittle that. But what I'm saying is, I feel like there are more teams out there that are more deserving of that number 13 slot than Notre Dame is. It makes no sense to me. That's really all I have to say about Notre Dame, really. I mean, it's crazy. And then I'm going to have to advocate for a team that I don't really like too terribly much, but you cannot deny the season that they had last season. I mean, look at that. Their record speaks for me. I don't have to really sit here and talk. I don't have to sit here and talk really much about them because you look at all of those W's. They won an entire season without a loss. Their only loss was in their conference championship game, which went into overtime. They could have very well easily won that game. And then, of course, their only other loss just so happened to be the number 1 team in the nation, who just was stacked to begin with. I mean, Georgia has been a force to be reckoned with the last couple of years. But like, that's the crazy thing is we're going to not reward TCU for beating who's now currently in, as far as the coaches poll is concerned, the number 2 team in the nation. TCU beat them in the bowl game, the semifinals of last year, but yeah, we're going to put Michigan at number 2 this year, and then we're going to put TCU at number 16. How does that make any sense? It doesn't. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, if I haven't proven how messed up these preseason polls are by now and how illogical they are, I don't know what will. I mean, look, think of all these other teams that get left out of the playoffs or not considered playoff eligible because they get thrown so far down in the rankings at the start of the season, even though they're, quote unquote rankings that don't matter. You can't tell me that people don't sit there and at least consider these rankings later on when we get to the polls that do matter. You can't sit there and tell me that these polls don't matter, because they do. It's our first impression of these teams going into the season. Let's move on to Kansas State. I was tempted to remove Kansas State from this talk, just because, I mean, they still had a lot of wins in their season. But, you know, they do have some notable losses to kind of go over. Like Tulane, for example, and then Texas is another one of those notable losses that, like, come on. A Texas team that really kind of struggled and you lose to them. Like, that one should have been a win as far as I'm concerned with Kansas State. But that being said, do I think Kansas State deserves a 17 rank? That one could be possibly a good spot for Kansas State. And that's kind of why I kind of considered removing them from this talk. But, like, it's kind of crazy to me that Texas is above them. I know Texas beat them last year, but Kansas State had a much more impressive record than Texas did. So, I mean, I don't really have much more to say about Kansas State other than, as an Oklahoma fan, which is who I'm about to talk about next, is I hope that we can figure something out and beat them. If we play them, then we may not even get to avenge that loss, unfortunately. But now I'm gonna have to talk about Oklahoma, because I completely disagree with our placement. And you might be thinking, oh, he's a Sooner fan. He thinks that they should be number 1. I do not even think that we should be on the 25 list. I don't see how. Oh, I just realized that I forgot to switch over to the Kansas State. So, I mean, it really doesn't matter. I'll skip over Kansas State in terms of the graphics, because it's not that important. Because Kansas State, you can easily argue that a 17th spot is a decent spot for Kansas State, because they had a decent record, but they did have a couple of notable losses. But going back to Oklahoma, I look at this record here, and I can't. I don't understand it. I don't understand how we have such a high rank. We shouldn't even be on this 25 list. I'm sorry. Oklahoma does not deserve to be on the top 25, at least to start the season. You think of how many games they lost. They got shut out by Texas, who didn't have a great season themselves. I mean, that is the most losses I have seen OU have in a single season and since I've been a fan, which, I mean, I must admit, it's not been too terribly long, but the last 7 or 8 years or so, I've been a pretty solid OU fan. And all the people, all the Sooner fans out there who might like be like, oh, you're a traitor, blah blah blah, for thinking we should be lower. I think OU plays their best when they are the underdogs, when everybody thinks that they don't have a chance. And like, I feel like we're just setting ourselves up for failure by putting us at rank 19. We shouldn't even be ranked this year after last year. I want to see my Sooners earn their spot. I want to see my Sooners go from 0 to hero, to start a season where nobody has any kind of, like, I want our Sooners to go under radar, like, or what's the word? I don't want them to be like, I want them to go under the radar. I don't want them to be bolstered up by their brand just as much as I don't want Alabama's brand name to bolster them. I don't want Texas brand name to bolster them, and I don't want Notre Dame's brand to bolster them. Literally, those are teams that are in their spots because of their brands, and same is true for Oklahoma. We don't deserve to be 19. I'm sorry, but I hope we do earn that spot, and I hope we earn the higher spots as well throughout the season. But as of right now, when we haven't seen a single down of the season, we should not be at 19. And I hope they prove me wrong. Once we get past their first games, I think that's when the true test will start. But all that to say, like, I can't help but laugh at the coaches poll. I think it is a joke. I think that it shouldn't even have any kind of merit to it. And I get all this information from ESPN's website, by the way. So that's where I found all of these graphics and things. So just so everybody knows, so you can go click on those different, or go to the different teams if you want to find all this information for yourself. But I look at that and I laugh, because this is what they view these teams at without a single down being played. And when you look at their previous records in the previous season, the only data that we have access to of these teams, the only information that we can go off of is their previous season. And I mean, I guess you could argue the spring games, each team's spring games, whoever, if everybody's played a spring game or whatever, the scrimmage practices and stuff. That is really the only information we have of how these teams are going to be. So if I had my way, and I shouldn't say this yet because I will get into my way later on in the stream. / I guess it's kind of a podcast, more so than a stream, but to kind of have, or like the way I would have it is I would have no preseason polls at all. I would get rid of all of them if I had my way, because they do nothing but harm to especially to teams like, I think of teams like UCF, the year that they went undefeated. I think they went like 2 or 3 seasons in a row undefeated, and they were still left out of the playoffs miraculously. I get it. They weren't in a Power 5 conference at the time, which, shout out to them coming into the Big 12, as my Sooners leave, of course. But still, that's cool, and I hope that gives them, I guess, more merit for being in the Big 12. But I feel bad for teams like that. I mean, look at Cincinnati that year, where like everybody and their mother wanted to leave Cincinnati out of the equation, out of the top 4, when they were literally the only team in the entire nation to be undefeated going into the playoffs. Yeah, they definitely got killed, but the fact that they had the chance, they had an opportunity, is all that matters. And I'm very happy, but it really irritated the crap out of me that everybody didn't want them in there. It's like, they're the only undefeated team in the nation, and you're going to leave the only undefeated team out of the playoffs. That's stupid. So I couldn't help but laugh about that, but also be really irritated with that. And so later on, I'll kind of go more in depth of like the way I would structure things, and it's kind of reminiscent of the BCS era in terms of how they ranked everything. But I think that there was definitely some benefits to the BCS system, and so it'll be very similar to that. But I'll get into that in just a second. I do want to kind of go over really briefly another preseason poll from a man that I respect heavily. I enjoy it whenever he and Gus Johnson, and you those of you who watch college football will already know where I'm going with this. But he and Gus Johnson are my favorite announcers when they announce Sooner football. And I know that he hates preseason polls too, and probably for the same reasons I do. But then I look at his preseason poll and I'm just like, what are you doing? And I did use his poll as the part of the thumbnail for this very stream. But here's Joel Klatt's preseason poll, and I can agree with some of it. Like, I mean, you cannot deny Georgia, and even like Michigan, they're a decent team. They're a little ranked high for my liking. I like Ohio State being up there. They're a pretty good team. But then you get to Alabama. Once again, Alabama is given the benefit of the doubt. Again, they're always every preseason poll for the last 15 years, it seems like. Maybe not every year, but it feels like the vast majority of every preseason, they're in the top 4 slot of just about everybody's preseason polls. And I'm kind of tired of that. Like, they're not a perfect team every single season. And like when you give them the benefit of the doubt, and also you put their opponents in high ranking positions, then if they lose to those teams, then it's considered a quality win, and so it just keeps them in the top 10 at the very least. And it just, excuse me, it just is annoying to see that. And so as much as I love Joel Klatt, and I think that he's phenomenal at what he does, he is a phenomenal sports broadcaster, and I love what he has to say about college football in general and all the different teams. And I mean, he's very knowledgeable in this sort of thing. But I do feel like he's got a lot of things wrong in his preseason poll. Just looking at other teams, once again, I think he has USC way too high. And then once again, like, even he is kind of dissing on the Big 12 a bit by putting the very first Big 12 team at number 14. And it's not TCU, it's Texas. Like, why is TCU getting so much hate? Like, they should be the first Big 12 team on that list. Makes no sense. Makes no sense to me. So, and once again, I don't think Oklahoma, my favorite team, should even be on this list. At least not yet. I hope they prove it to me. I hope they prove me wrong. But once again, this is a preseason poll. The only information we have about these teams is what we saw last year. So anyways, without further ado, I'm going to move on to how I would structure the ranking system. All right, so I've brought up an Excel, or it's not Excel, it's Google spreadsheets. Here is something that I've been kind of working on the last couple days. And this is kind of how I would structure the ranking system for college football. And once again, I want to, preface, I think that's the right word I'm going for. This by saying this is probably very similar to what the BCS, how the point system worked and all of that. I might have different values and award varying points in different ways, but I'm sure the premise is the same. But I created this little spreadsheet here, and it has a lot of I think very useful tools that will help me fill out this data relatively quickly. And kind of starting out, I have every team in alphabetical order, and I have the color code. Whatever their school colors are, is what I have them I guess labeled as, or labeled with. But it's one way, of course, to keep to stay organized. But I also, with these team names, have associated a link to every single team, and this link takes me to their website, or not the website, the ESPN stats website. So it'll take me directly, like if I wanted to look up, let's see, what's a team that I just can randomly look up. Let's do NC State. So if I wanted to get the stats for NC State, and hopefully that pops up. I think I have it to where it only pops up specific. Oh, and it did. Well, I gotta go back. I thought I clicked the transition button. There we go. I gotta go back to my spreadsheet and re-explain this. I totally thought I clicked that button, but I guess I didn't. This is the spreadsheet that I was talking about. So I created this spreadsheet, and so I color coded them based off of the school colors, and then but each team name has a link associated with them. So all you have to do is go down and you can click on the link, and I already clicked the NC State link, and I don't know if it's gonna pop up in OBS. Okay, it does pop up. Cool. So it takes me to the ESPN team website. I can click on statistics, and it gives me all the information in the 2022 year, but whenever the 2023 year starts, I will have all that data right here. I'll just be able to click on that and be able to fill out the table, this table, with that information. All that information is here, with the exception, I do think that tackles for loss, the TFLs, are not included on ESPN's website for some reason. It's kind of weird. For some reason, the ESPN team stats doesn't have anything about defense, and I find that very odd because they have an offensive team stats, but they don't have anything about defensive team stats. So if ESPN somehow miraculously finds this channel and watches this stream, please add defensive team stats to your website. I mean, that just seems kind of messed up to not provide that information. But tackles for loss, I think is a good thing to reward teams with, and the fact that I'm gonna have to go to other sources to find that particular information. It is what it is, but I feel like that information should be on their website, on the ESPN website. But you have all these other categories. So I rank the teams based off of the total points. So the more points you have, the higher the rank you are. And to get points, so if you click on the wins column, you'll see a multiply by 1,000. So for every win you have, you multiply that times 1,000. So for a regular season game, you will have a minimum of 12,000 points, right? I believe it's 12 games a season. So you can have a minimum of 12,000. I deduct 500 points per loss. So in terms of your win-loss, unless you have more losses than wins, like even if you have more losses than wins, you have to have like a significant amount of your games be lost for you to be in the negative category. Otherwise, you should almost always be positive. I have a column for points scored, which whatever points you get is what your points would be on this sheet. And then I have something called point margin. So this is another area that is possible to get negative points in, but you can also get positive points in this. So if you win your game, you get a positive point margin. If you lose your game, you get a negative point margin. Then you have TDs, which if you click on that one, I multiply every single touchdown by 100 points. So for every touchdown you get throughout the season, I will multiply them by 100 points. Field goals, I multiply those by 50. First downs, I multiply those by 10. Total yards, whatever total yards you get is how many points you get. Total sacks, so like I've been rewarding the offenses and even the special teams, but now I am also rewarding the defense and their some of their achievements. I do kind of wish I had more defensive stats to fill out, but once again, for some reason ESPN is kind of stingy with their defensive stats. But I have sacks. For every sack you get 10 points. For turnovers, if you get a turnover in the game, you get 50 points. So for every 50 points you get, or for every touchdown you get 50 points. And then tackles for loss, I multiply those by 5. And so all I have to do is, whenever I'm filling out this information, so I'm just going to kind of start at the very top. Let's go all the way to the very top of this sheet. And I'll probably just kind of fill out, and not like real values by any means. I'll just kind of go through and put like fake values in. But I'll kind of, to go over the process, what I would do is I would click, let's say on Air Force, and then I would click statistics, and I would go through and find all the information I need, and then go back and start filling in the gaps. So let's say Air Force, they won 6 of their games, which would mean they would lose 6 of their games. Let's say their total points that they scored in the entire season, probably like 4,000. That seems like a decent number. Their point margins, let's say if you add up every game, their point margins adds up to 150 points. I don't know. That seems kind of low, or it may even seem high, depending. I don't know. Without actually like looking at point margins, it's kind of hard to know. But you get touchdowns. Let's say I don't really know what a team's average touchdown count is in a season. I'll just say, for the sake of this, you get 52 touchdowns in a season. That seems very high for a team that's only won 6 of their games, but I don't know. Maybe they had really great offense but terrible defense. And you can see that it multiplied it times 100 as well. Field goals, I don't know. Let's just say they scored 25 field goals the entire season. I don't really know if that's a legit number. First downs throughout the entire season, I don't know. That's probably going to be a high number as well. So, because like for every touchdown, I'm not even going to do the math. I'm just going to throw out a random number. Let's do 750. That seems a little extreme, but once again, this is just a mock-up to like kind of prove the concept here. And I'll do this for like 1 or 2 other teams. But you can already tell, like, because there is points in this first team, it automatically updated the Air Force to be ranked number 1. Now, technically, it doesn't auto sort them. I will go over the sorting process here in just a little bit, but I have an easy way to sort the teams based off of their rank. So total yards, I don't really know what a good yardage is. I'm just gonna say, and I don't know why I put 4,000 points. I think I was thinking yards. 4,000 seems a little high. I don't know. I'm just gonna leave it. Once again, it's just a mock-up to a proof of concept. Total yards. Yeah, I think we'll do 5,580 total yards. I don't know. Maybe that's a little too or not enough, or I don't know. Number of sacks. Let's say they got like 11 sacks in the entire season. Seems a little low, but why not? And then forced turnovers. Let's do 13. And then tackles for loss. That one would probably be relatively high. I could see there being like 40 maybe in a season, maybe more. I like, once again, like this is just something that I, I'm kind of just throwing out values. It means nothing. Well, you're not wrong, and that's what I explain in this stream is I actually do explain that, they quote unquote technically don't matter, but yet they kind of do. They do influence. Even if it's a little bit of an influence, they still influence the overall rankings. I get it. It is a poll. It's not the true college football rankings that is what actually matters at the end of the season. I get that. That is a completely different poll. But the rankings do influence the committee. The fact that there is a criteria called the eye test tells me that those other polls do matter. Because how else, by what standard do you set the eye test to? Like, to me, that makes no sense. The whole eye test argument that they throw out all the time. It's like, all right, what standard of eye test are you looking at? Because if you're going based off of like quality wins, well, what makes a quality win a quality win? And they determine that based off of these polls. The preseason polls and even the kind of mid-season polls. That is their quote unquote quality wins. Or they go off of brand names. But that's my point. I'm not trying to say that the preseason polls are what we go off of, or what the entirety of college football goes off of. But what I am saying is it influences the polls. But if we had my way, every team would be starting out. Every team would be ranked 1, or I like it better that everybody's ranked 133, because there's 133 teams. But I think that everybody should earn their spots. It shouldn't be just handed to them by the media. And Camptown, you're exactly right. I am not an expert, and I definitely don't want to claim to be an expert. This is just a fan of the sport. I'm just kind of had enough of what I've seen in the years that I've been a fan of the sport. it the amount of bias that is behind all of these different polls is ridiculous. And I'm just kind of coming up with a solution. Like I don't want, it's one thing to sit here and complain about it and then not have any kind of solutions. I'm throwing out a possible solution to that. Getting rid of preseason polls is, I think, what needs to happen. Will it happen? Probably not. I think we will always have preseason polls and early season polls and that sort of thing. But this is my solution to that, is having it completely a points-based system. But then I do have a second list after the regular season is done. But I will get to that here in just a second. I will once again do a proof of concept. So let's say Akron has 10 wins, and we'll say that they have 2 losses. Excuse me. Total points that they score. We'll say that they scored 5,000. Once again, I think I was thinking total yardage whenever I was filling this one out earlier, and so I don't think 5,000 or 4,000 is even possible in a season. But who knows? Maybe it is. Point margin, I don't know, 200. Touchdowns, I said 52 earlier. Let's say that they got 60. 60 touchdowns. Field goals, I'm just gonna say that they did less field goals. They were more efficient on the field, and so they didn't need to kick as many field goals as Air Force did. First downs, I said 750 first downs. I'm gonna say 900. I don't know. Just once again, this is a proof of concept. Total yardage. Let's just do 7,500. That's probably really high, but who knows? Sacks, we'll say they do 14 sacks in their season. And oops. Uh-oh. There we go. What? There. And then turnovers, we'll do 14 forced turnovers. Sure. And then tackles for loss, I don't know. What did I say on that one? I'll do let's see, 75. Yeah, we'll do 75. That seems like a decent number. All right, so as you can see, the ranks automatically the ranks are tied to the total points. So as you can see, Akron has more points than Air Force. So it puts Akron at rank number 1, and then Air Force is rank number 2 and 3. And you might be thinking, oh, that's great and all, but that'd be kind of annoying seeing them all in like a random order. Well, in order to rearrange everything based off of the right order that you want it to be in, it's either A through Z or Z through A. It's kind of weird. Okay, it is A through Z. And that sets it up to where the teams are now in the order at which their rank is in. So if we did filled out more values, which I'm not going to do for the sake of time, but if we filled out every one of these teams and we get different point values, all of these teams will be rearranged in order of their rank. And so that'll be a way that I'm going to be able to keep track of my own kind of ranking poll system. It'll be completely unbiased system, completely arranged by points. So I'm going to by this criteria, and if you guys have any suggestions on other criteria that you guys would like for me to add to this that you think is a very important, like, game-changing criteria, please let me know and I will add it and fix that, or add that criteria to make it a little bit more worth it. Or if you think some of these values that I have need to be tweaked a little bit, by all means let me know. I'm definitely open to suggestions on that, especially before the season. But once the season starts, I will not change it. So once the season starts, what we have is what I will kind of go through. And I kind of want to do this as a series, so I like throughout the season I would like to post updates on what my rankings are based off of this model. And real quick, I do think I forgot to mention like how the totals factor in. So that, like, these cells here adds up everything in the cells following it on that row. So this is the sum of this cell to this cell, and then same as for this guy, and it just kind of goes down. And that's, as I fill out the information, it'll automatically add the total points to the overall points. So, and if I wanted to rearrange the teams based off of their alphabetical order, or if I wanted to arrange the points based off of total points, which would still be the same as rank, since the rank is determined by the points. If we wanted to figure out what team had the most wins, we could arrange it based off of that. If we wanted to see which team had the most losses, we can arrange it based off of that. Points scored, and so on and so forth. You get the idea. I mean, it's really cool though. Like, I'm a big spreadsheet nerd, I guess. I like to mess around on spreadsheets and create different like functions and different things that makes data entry significantly easier. So I think it's cool. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a nerd, but I think it's gonna be fun going throughout the season. It's a lot of work. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, it'll definitely take me time every week. It'll take me some time to go through every single school and fill out this information, but I think it'd be worth it. And I think it'd be kind of cool to see where my teams end up. The teams that I have on here. I would love to see what my top 10 teams are from this model by the end of the season. And at least during the regular season, I will probably crown the team with the most points as my quote unquote national champion for the regular season, at least, just because my model can only go as far as the regular season games. I don't really have a model for the playoff teams, other than, of course, our top 4 teams go to a playoff. But then obviously if the team wins, then they advance to the next round. So I mean there's really nothing you can do about that at that point. It's totally up to the teams whether or not they're the national champions. But, and of course my top 4 might be different than the national top 4, or the committee's top 4. So I won't really, unless my model is completely the same as what the committee's model is, then, I mean, I guess technically then my champion won't be crowned. So there is that. So this is for the regular season. So in the middle of the season, or all the way to the very end of the season, that is what this spreadsheet is for. Now I have a second spreadsheet which is not finished. Still have to work on it, but this is a spreadsheet for postseason. Even I would even say post conference championship game. Because I would award 2,000 points to conference champions. So I would take my list from the previous page. I would take whatever these teams end up as. I will take that list and then add points to the teams that, of course, win their conference championship. But I would also go through and award points based off of strength of schedule. And the only way that I can think of an unbiased way of doing strength of schedule is awarding points based on your rank in the first list. So if you take my list, or at the end of the season, you take the list from the previous page and you assign point values to each rank. And for the sake of making it easy or simple, if you're rank 1, if you beat a team that's ranked number 1, you would get 133 points because there's 133 teams. But then I would probably multiply that times 10. So you like if you beat the number 1 team on my top or on my list, then you get 100 or 1,330 points. If that makes sense. Or if you beat the number 2, you would get 132 or 1,320 points. If you beat the 133rd team, you only get 10 points because they would be the dead last. So you'd get the least amount of points. But basically where their rank is how many points you get per team on your schedule. So you add up all of your opponent's points that you get that you won. If you won that game, you get to add that value to your team or to that team on this list, and then that will spit out the true champion as far as I'm concerned. Because what that does is that does take strength of schedule into consideration, because my model only has people who are dominant into consideration. So if you dominate literally every one of your games, then you're going to be at the top. But you may be dominant because you have a very weak schedule. And so to keep that information in mind, in terms of dominance, I will put that entire list in another spreadsheet, and then add whether or not they were a conference champion, and I would grant like another 2,000 points if you won your conference championship game, and then I would add points for every opponent that you beat based on what their rank is, and in the last page, if that makes sense. So that's kind of how I would structure the ranking system, go throughout the season, and so I think that is how you can get away from bias. Like I'm a Sooner fan, through and through, but this model might hurt my Sooners. Like if they don't come and play well, then they may not be my national champion, and that's fine, because college football should have unbiased opinions about these teams. In terms of ranking them, it should be completely based off of their performances, not based off of their brand names. And so that is kind of the whole point of this entire, I guess, kickoff stream, if you will, is to really expose, I guess, or for lack of a better term, not really expose, but just talk about the issue of preseason polls or even mid-season polls, and then come up with the potential solution that completely removes bias data, because that's really like even the college football playoff committee, a lot of what they come up with is biased information. I mean, they put everything to a vote, so I mean, at least it's kind of a democratic thing, but it's kind of it's left up for failure, or it's left up to bias opinions about what they feel like a team should be ranked, rather than whether or not they truly deserve that rank. And I want to eliminate that, because I'm tired of the teams that go to the playoffs every single year, and sometimes they win it, sometimes they lose, but they're constantly given that opportunity when there's other teams that are just as deserving, who did just the same amount or had better record than these other teams, but were left out because the brand named team was able to have a good enough record. And that's what I'm trying to get rid of, or that. And once again, like, this is just a fan going over all this, so I mean, I don't expect anybody to adopt this. This is my own personal thing, but once again, I didn't want to be the internet guy who like sits there and complains about an issue and then not give a solution, or a potential solution, if you will. So that's kind of really all I have to say. I mean, this was about an hour and 10-minute long stream, so if you kind of stuck around, I really do appreciate it. And this stream will be available to watch even after the fact, so if you are able to watch this sometime in the future, I hope you guys enjoyed. And once again, I want some feedback. I want some feedback on my poll, or how I'm going to poll everything. What the point system looks like. Please give me feedback on that. I really want to make sure that I am as unbiased as I possibly can, and as fair as I possibly can. And I hope I explained everything fairly well, at least well enough to understand kind of what everything is. I do, like, if anything, I'm hoping that there are suggestions in regards to adding more defensive stats to reward, because the defense is just as important, if not more important, than the offense. And so I want there to be plenty of points earned for the entire team on the defense as much as the offense, because the offense, they provide a lot of points, and the defense doesn't provide nearly as much, at least in my current model. But this is expandable, so I can add more columns to this list, but this is, I think, a good starting point at least. And then maybe I don't do anything this season to change it, but maybe like next season I can add more criteria to it. But we'll just kind of see what you guys have. But once again, if I get it, once the season starts, then whatever I have this locked at is what this is going to be locked at. And so there will be no changing of data. It'll be okay, whatever happens on the field, that's what gets recorded. And so that's really all I have to say. And once again, I do appreciate those who stuck around, and I hope you guys have a great college football season. Whomever team that you root for, I hope that it's a memorable season for you. And yeah, see y'all later. Bye.